We're going to go ahead and get started and try to jump into an actual automation build with Plutio, one of the automation tools that are popular, including Zapier, Integromat, Integrately, and Pabbly. So those four I have pulled up here, as well as my demo Plutio account, or my trial account. So what we're going to be doing is reading into a user's submitted build that they want to see, either as a specific automation or something they can accomplish with Plutio and one of the automation tools. So we're going to jump into one of those requests and then actually build it live, so that either they can see it on the recording later, or if they jump into the actual meeting, they can see it being built live as well. So again, if you guys want to jump into the Zoom meeting, I have it listed down in the comments. Jump in with me, start discussing, or start sending over your ideas or things you'd like to see automated. Again, it's free, no charge. Just jump in here and start discussing with me. Okay, so one of the requests that a user sent over is using Zapier or Pabbly, and they want to see a form submission sent to a Google Sheet. So what we can do with that type of a request is it's pretty specific. It's not too generic. And what I would ask from that person, if I was building this for them, is what data they wanted to see, how they would map it into Google Sheets, and then how they would want to map that data when it's in the automated state, for the automation to actually drop all those values into a specific column or into a specific field of Google Sheets. So let's log into Google Sheets here. We'll get a quick spreadsheet pulled up, just a demo one. So we have a little bit of internet or browser issues. Stand by. So what I'll do is if I can't get into Google Sheets, I'll just jump into an Excel sheet and we'll kind of build it that way. There really is not too much of a difference between Google Sheets and Excel Online. I'll put it to you like that: Excel Online and Google Sheets. So since I apparently can't get access to Google Sheets with the network that I'm using, we're going to use Excel Online instead. And this is my account, my business's account, but really they're two very similar apps. They're an online spreadsheet tool. The Excel Online is a version of Excel where you would get it on your desktop or in your organization, whereas the normal or standard Excel lives on a desktop client or inside of the actual local PC or even a virtual PC. So this is Excel Online. It's just a version of Excel. There's no macros or no real heavy capability or processing capability, because it's all accomplished in browser. So what we'll do is just rename it to automation test. And then what we're going to do is just set up some fields once we get like a demo form from our account. So let's create a form, call it test. Actually, I have a good form that we could use for this. I'm going to switch to my actual live Plutio account instead of my demo. And then what we're going to do is set up a bug report form. So this is a demo form that I have living in not only my account, but I'm also showing it and testing it with the new dashboard feature. So if you guys haven't been testing out the dashboard feature, feel free to jump in there and try that out if you're not in the beta program. Turn that toggle on in your account down here to get into that. But one of the dashboards I've been playing with has a couple of forms that live on my client's page as they log in. So one of the forms that I'm going to be showing with this automation is actually this demo form as a bug report. Hey, Jason, thanks for joining. No need to unmute or jump in if you don't want to. If you just want to observe, that's fine. I'm going over a automation that was submitted to me for this session that a user wanted to see a form submission to a Google Sheet. I'm having a little bit of connectivity issue with getting into Google Sheets app itself. So we're just going to be jumping into Excel Online instead. But from here, what we would do is make sure that we have all the fields mapped. This is why I wanted to show the actual form itself. So we'll go into the form editor, into this bug report form. Now, again, depending on what you want to drop into your form, from your form into Excel Online or Google Sheets, you just have to find the fields and make sure they're mapped into your destination, be it Google Sheets or Excel. So here in my form, I have first name, then last name, the email address, any screenshots, like a description or a long text field. And then I also have a priority field. So it's just a multi-select drop down of a different criticality or of a priority. So if I want all these values to pull into my sheet or into my spreadsheet to track, then I have to set up these fields to take those values. If you don't, then when you go in to map this into your automation, it's going to either give you errors depending on the tool that you're using, or it's going to not map correctly to if you have a current schema or like a current table inside of Excel or Google Sheets, or even if you're using something like Airtable and you have specified fields that you want these values to drop into, you need to make sure that the fields match and map correctly to your source data, which is here in Plutio. Okay, so what we'll do is set up some fields real quick. So we'll do first name, last name, priority. You don't necessarily have to go in exact order as your form is if you don't want to. I have mine as like a screenshot in kind of the middle of the form because I want them to try and do that before they submit the form or before they go into a descriptions. Because for me, troubleshooting with an IT background, I want to see images of the actual issue. So I want to have them drop any images in there if they have any first off. Okay, so we've got our fields mapped: first, last, the email, the description, the priority, and any attachments. Now, I will caveat this field and say, depending on the tool that we use, we can iterate and pull out those attachments, say if they have more than one, or if they're able to upload more than one, depending on the form type that you're using or the form that you are using and how you built it. We are, in some tools, able to iterate through and pull out each individual attachment, but I will say it depends on the tool you're using. I know with Zapier, they recently rolled out a feature called looping. In Integromat, that's called an iterator. So it does depend on the tool that you're using. I know Pabbly does have that feature as well. So again, it depends on the tool you're using and what it's capable of doing. Okay, so we've got our form ready to go. We've got our fields so that we can map into it. This person wanted to see it in Zapier, so we're going to start with Zapier first. So what we would do is set up our source app, so Plutio. And again, this is inside Zapier in my account. And then we would like to get it into Excel. And right here, we've got our trigger, new form submission. And what do I want to do? I want to either add a row to a table or add a row to a worksheet. Now, I will say both Zapier and Integromat have these two features in their actions, and they are different. Adding a row to a table is not the same as adding a row to a worksheet. In this instance right here, this is a worksheet. So for this automation, it would actually be adding a row to a worksheet. So it just says add row. Talk at the moment. Okay, Jason, I see your chat. Sorry about that. I just noticed it. I haven't really used Plutio much over the years. How robust are the dashboards? Pros and cons. Jason, this is actually a brand new feature. So it's hard to describe the pros and cons right now. I can say that for most people, it's mostly all pro. Like I was showing you quick before in my client view of the dashboard, I can just tell you that I think it's going to be an amazing feature, and it's going to really bring some great value to owners, to business owners, to people that are using Plutio for their clients and for their business. But just to even show you what it's capable of, aside from the kind of compressed and condensed screen, I think this feature is going to be awesome. And I think it's going to really, really, really set apart Plutio from a lot of its competitors. This screen is entirely customizable, pretty much down to you using CSS down here in this area here. So to me, I think it's going to be an extremely valuable capability for business owners and for users, not only just clients, but again, business owners, because they can display a lot of critical information to their clients right up front, either invoice charts or projects. I took away 2 of the kind of default blocks here, but it's got pending tasks, pending invoices, contracts. So I mean, really, you can drop in any quick metric that you may want to show your clients really easily without having to do things in a different tool and then bring that data back into it. You had mentioned Clipfolio and other dashboard tools for the business. Keep your ear to the ground. There may be a tool coming out in the future that we can move data from Plutio to one of those tools. I'm not going to go into the weeds on that yet because it's still a baby right now. It's still being formed, and just keep your ear to the ground for that. That's all I'll say. But doing actual like dashboarding or actual BI type work, I don't know if that's truly possible inside of Plutio itself when it comes to the dashboarding or to getting more specific metrics. Like if you want to do formulas or things like measures, how it is in things like Power BI or Tableau, where you can actually get down and do like business specific formulas and metrics and things like that. But again, I've only been playing with it for a day or so since they just dropped it. But I know you can do a lot of things here in the metrics. So you can actually connect. The cool part, and one thing I like about it, I'm getting off track with our actual session a little bit, but I wanted to go over it a bit. With the API connection in the metric item, you can actually connect to I believe you can connect to third-party data sources and bring data into your Plutio account to show. So if you had something that was pulling data into, say, Clipfolio or into like a database, like a true database, say even Airtable can connect via API. You can pull data in from that source, say Airtable, and display it inside of your Plutio account, which is actually pretty awesome. That's a really cool feature that I don't think it may get much traction at the start, but to those that are more capable and competent with APIs and know how to connect to them and use them, I think it's going to be a pretty awesome feature for folks that have a lot of data sitting outside of Plutio. So you would do that capability here in the add metric API, and then you find a way to connect your API to your Plutio account. Yeah, it's brand new. Like they dropped the beta Monday. I think they pulled it back a day and then they redropped it on Tuesday or Wednesday. So it's very, very new, like this week. Yeah, but it's been in development for a few months. Sorry guys, I'm reading the comments from Jason. Let's see, didn't know it's that new. Yeah, like I said, brand new. Doing something like that. Don't know if it's ready for that. I'm not sure yet. I am a Plutio expert, so if you want to take that offline and chat with me, feel free. No, it's fine, Jason. No problem at all. I like to talk about it. So if you want to take that offline and discuss with me, I'd love to talk about that and learn from your use case how to use that as well. because I know looking at this feature, it's a ingestion capability, like you can ingest and bring data in from an API. But at the moment, I don't know if you can push data out from this capability to another source. I know you can actually connect data like to like Power BI. I was able to connect a Power BI report to Plutio, or actually to Airtable, not Plutio right yet. I've been messing with their API, but it is possible if you know how to do it and can set it up correctly to pull data out of Plutio with the API. But yeah, that's where you would do that right here. Is through this add metric API, and then again it's ingestion, and then you could again set up your actual metric and what you wanted to do, set your range, and then add it. Okay, so again, this use case that I have right here is using the dashboard. Very cool way to do this. But to get to a form, you don't have to use a dashboard. You don't have to use like the client side dashboard. You can use the form from really anywhere that it's accessible through a URL or through an iframe embed. If you have the form sitting on your site for some reason, or if you have the form sitting really anywhere and it gets submitted, it'll then kick off this automation. So again, it doesn't matter where the form is. I have 2 forms on my website that I use for various uses right now. And again, it does the same thing. You can even get to the form through a URL, just a standard URL right here in forms. And then if you find the form itself, go to copy link, you can just pull up that form from a URL and then submit it that way. So really in this automation, it doesn't matter where the form is. It's not pertinent to, you know, I need a form that's on this URL. But what we're going to get into once we get through these setup steps is how to set your automation and your workflow to work better for you when it comes to which form you want. Because I know, like for my use, I have a bunch of forms that I use. Some for lead generation, new client onboarding. I have some for feedback and some actual just generic connecting forms, like, hey, send me a message type forms. And then there's some that I'm using and going to be using more heavily for actual client interaction between my clients. And those 2 that I've been playing with the dashboard are actually going to live on my client's dashboard to send over support type requests, or even like new project requests that they want to do new work with me. I'm going to start that process with a form. So again, we'll get into this once we do all the setup and make sure everything works from that. So we have right here, again, we're using Zapier real quick, just to recap. We've got new form submission to Excel. Again, this user wanted Google Sheets, and you would do the exact same thing right here. You go Google Sheets, pull up the app, again, grab your same trigger, new form submission, and then you would go create. Where's that? Right here, not spreadsheet. Create spreadsheet row. Sorry about that, guys. Create spreadsheet row right here, or rows. So that looks like you can create more than one row, and then create a row here. It doesn't look like you're able to work with the table object inside of Google Sheets, but again, that's the difference between Excel and Google, is a table object is different than a regular worksheet. What that looks like here, if Excel Online will let me do it, is an actual table. So again, just picture this. This is a worksheet. So if you're doing it like this, I advise against it when I'm building things for clients, because it's not dynamic, it's not static, and it's easily breakable, and it's easily manipulatable and editable and deletable. So what I would do actually here is I would go, if you had values in these worksheets or in these fields or rows in Excel, I would go insert table. So again, let me backtrack. Insert table. It has headers because I'm including these values in my headers. Okay. So now this is what a table looks like inside of Excel. So when I actually set up the automation inside of Zapier, again, 2 different things. We've got add a row to a table, and that's what this action pertains to inside of Zapier. Add a row to a table means I'm adding a row, I'm appending a new row to the end of this table. So if I have a ton of values here, or however big or wide this is, I'm just going to add a new row to the table at the end of it. And again, the big difference here, add a row to a table versus adding a row to a worksheet just right here. Okay, so what we'll do here is keep this add a row to a table, new form submission. So this is our Zap. It's simple, 2 steps. What we're going to include in this Zap, and what I always recommend to my users, my clients, and people that I'm building things for, is a filter at least after the new form submission. Whether I'm using Zapier or Integromat, I always recommend using a filter action after that first step, and I'll explain why. And you can use that filter in any of these automation tools, whether it's Zapier, Integromat, all across the board. They all have a filter capability that you can use, and I'll show you why that's handy here in a second. Okay, so let's try it. If you have issues connecting your apps to Plutio or to Zapier, I have a different video that I recorded in our last session on how to connect all of these automation tools to Plutio, and I go really in depth on some of the nuances of that in this in that video. Sorry, I'll put the link in the comments on Facebook here in a second if you want to reference that video as well. And I'll point you to that video now, because I'm not going to go through that right now. That's a lot of detail that I don't necessarily have time for. So if you want to reference that that video, please do that, and it'll get you set up correctly, or at least how I think is correct to get started with Plutio and using automations. Okay, so I've already got my account set up. Now there's also 2 ways that you can do this automation setup. You can do it either with a webhook, or you can do it with an actual app, a pre-built app inside of Zapier. Now what the difference is, and I'll show you this right in a second, with this automation and with this specific Zap, you can actually choose the form that you would like to trigger this action off of. So when you connect to your account, and you'll see all the forms in your account. Where that is handy is if you have a very specific process that you want this one form to follow, and only this one form to follow, you can do this and then do all of your actions after that with that one form. In Integromat, last I checked, you do not have the ability to choose a specific form to trigger, and it's not instant, if anything. So this is Zapier, and I can go into detail in Integromat if you'd like, because the way that I set things up in Zapier versus Integromat are different because of the availability inside of Integromat with Plutio. Okay, so set up your trigger, new form submission, and again, this is limited to one form that you can select. So demo bug report. Okay, the other method that we would use, let me make sure this is saved. Get out of this. The other method to set up this kind of a Zap inside of Zapier, you can do a webhook. So webhook, again, premium app. That's a paid feature of Zapier. So if you're using Zapier heavily, or if you have a paid plan, you can access this as well. I won't go into too much detail about Zapier or Integromat's plans unless you guys want me to. I can definitely do that about what's limited and what you can or can't do. But just know that Webhooks by Zapier is a premium Zapier app. Where we're going to use this is inside of Plutio. You're going to generate this webhook right here. It's not something you have to generate or you have to create. It's created for you when you create this module or this app inside of Zapier. What we're going to use is the catch hook method right here. So catch hook, not raw hook, just the catch hook. This is the more common, easily usable one. And it's going to generate this webhook URL right here. What you'll do with this, copy it, go back into Plutio, under settings, go down to your API manager. I'll point you to that previous video where I describe how to use this feature of Plutio, but you would drop that, that webhook into the new connection that you're using. So right here, let me just do this real quick. I explained my method of creating connections in that previous video as well. So I've got my workspace. I make sure that I'm using API version 1.9. I have a naming convention to keep track of all my connections because I have a lot of them. And in my previous video, I explained why, but what I would do here is I would deselect all, and it's a pain, I know. I'm sure Leo and team have a way to either do this themselves, or they're working on a feature to deselect these, or select all of them from a toggle or some kind of box. But for now, you need to deselect all of these until we get to form response.create. Again, I go into this in my previous video at length and in depth as to why. It's a little bit tedious now, but it's very, very crucial to me. Other people might have different viewpoints, but it's crucial to me that you do this. And I'll tell you why here in a second. Let me get this all deselected so you can see. And then I would hit create to create this connection. Now, where this comes into play is keep in, how do I explain this easily without confusing anybody? These are all API endpoints. So if something happens inside of your Plutio account that's tied to one of these endpoints, it's going to trigger this webhook in this data connection. So if you create anything in this, it's going to trigger this webhook. So if you create a project, edit a project, do any of these things, it's going to drop data into this webhook, so long as it's turned on, or it's connected to an app like Zapier or Integromat, and you've got that app selected, like a watch for a trigger or some kind of action. So just keep in mind that when you're using webhooks inside of Plutio tied to an automation platform, if you have these things selected in this and it's turned on, it's going to push data to that webhook. So please keep that in mind when you're using this method. It's very important that you understand that, so you don't just leave everything selected, turn the webhook on, and then you've got hundreds of zaps firing off because you either didn't select or deselect, or what I call descoping or scoping this this connection. And now you've got all these hundreds of zaps working, or these scenarios working inside of Integromat because of the webhook. So again, we're only focusing on form response.create. What that means is somebody created a form response. Some people get confused when it's form create or edit. These relate to editing or creating a form itself. So again, if you're using the forms area and you create one, that's what this is related to. What we care about is a creation of a response, somebody submitting a form to you. So again, form-response.create. Drop in your webhook URL right here, turn it on. Again, you can toggle it. Hit the create button right here. Boom, you've got a connection. Where you would also use this data, the client ID and secret, is if you didn't have a connection to your Plutio account, like if you're connecting it for the first time, what you're going to do is use those two values in the connection inside of Integromat or Zapier, or it's an authentication process. It's going to pop up another screen and says, hey, drop in your client ID, secret, and your business subdomain. They do. Yeah, Jason, they actually do. I don't know about best use cases, but if you go to docs.plutio.com, I can drop that in the comments and in the chat as well if you'd like it. I was recently using authentication, so it pulled up the authentication tag, but this is the actual official Plutio documentation library for their API. I believe it's built in Postman, if you're curious about it or if you're familiar with it. This relates to curl commands. They also have Node and PHP. listed as well if you'd like to use those. This is where you'd actually get true documentation and what you actually can or can't do with the API. If you need to do things with invoices or items, you can see all of the various methods that you can do. I will tell you that certain things do not have all of the same 4 methods. I've come to find that out as well. I forget an easy example offhand, but each item or entity, each area of the documentation has its own versions of each of these. So sometimes they're limited. Sometimes, like right here, block groups, there's only a get and a put method for this. Whereas I just saw down in, I believe it was proposals, there was a few, or projects, I'm not sure. There's a few listed right here. There's a delete, 2, 3 posts. And so it really depends on what you're trying to do with the API. But this is the actual documentation right here. No clue on the difference between the different types of commands. Those are methods of the API. So typically a post means you're putting data to the API or to the API endpoint or to the desired URL. I kind of hit on this a little bit, and I actually go into this here in a second when I describe how the webhook is used by Zapier, but pretty much a get, post, put, and delete are the programmable way to manipulate data inside of Plutio. So if I'm posting to Plutio, I'm from the source, I'm putting data into Plutio. I'm posting to Plutio. If I'm using a get, I'm getting data from Plutio. I'm getting it out of Plutio. Putting it or posting it, they are different. I'm not a programmer. I don't really know coding that very well, but posting it and putting it are similar, but putting it actually it updates and it messes with the actual entity inside of the API, whereas a post just creates something. Again, I apologize. I'm not a technical person, so if I'm confusing people or if you're watching this and it's wrong, I apologize. But Postman curl. I don't know of the difference to use over the other. If you're building, the way I understand it is if you're building an app or building like a server side actual API, you would use PHP. If you're using like app development and you're trying to build it with Node.js, which is a JavaScript language, you would use Node. And then curl is what I would use for things like Integromat or even something like Power BI or Clipfolio to actually run that curl to get the information from Plutio. It's actually a curl command or curl. Yep, perfect. Okay, so that's and again, guys, I'm sorry if I was confusing or if I was wrong. I apologize. I'm not a programmer or a coder by trade, so I'm learning this stuff as I go. But yeah, this is where you go to get all that. It's docs.plutio.com right here. Grab that and I'll post that in the comments. Okay, so let's get back here. So hooks, Zapier. All right, so we've got our connection set up here. We've got it all scoped to just form response.create. We got our toggle on. It's been created. Now, inside of our Zap, what we're looking for, let's test it. You're not really going to get much of a test on it if you haven't used the connection before. So you can skip it, that's fine. I run through testing with all of my builds. So it's fine to skip that step and start building the rest of your actions. So in this case, we're going to use Excel. We're going to go add a row to a table. Okay, that's the actual action that we're trying to do. What I was alluding to earlier with filtering is we need to set up a filter. And again, if you're using a paid plan of Zapier, this is a 3-step Zap. So it's a trigger, a filter, and an action. Keep in mind when you're building this, if you're on a free plan, you're limited in using this capability because you can't use a webhook and you can't use a 3-step Zap unless you are on a trial or you're on a paid plan. So bear in mind that. If we use Integromat, you can use that all for free under the paid plan or non-paid plan, I'm sorry. So +1 for Integromat if you're not using it. Look into doing that as well. Okay, so what we're going to look for in this is 2 things. We do have to send some live data, so I'm going to do that in a second, but I wanted to describe why we use filtering. What this is going to do is inside of your Plutio account, we've descoped everything. It's great. We're only looking at form responses. But what that kind of alludes to another problem is, okay, Guy, well, I have like 8 forms in my account. I just want to focus on one form for this process. Okay, that's easily done, because what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that with this individual process here in Zapier, we're only going to be looking at one form. So if I'm just looking at tracking bug reports in Excel, I just need to look at the bug report form. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab the form ID of the form itself. So right here, and I apologize if I'm moving too fast, you get this form ID by the embed right here, or you can get it up here in the URL up above, right here. But typically, I always like to go to the embed as well. So embed right here, it's the same number because it's the form ID inside of Plutio. You grab that, and then we're going to drop it into our filter. And what we're doing is making sure that this process, again, if it's the bug report process or bug report automation, bug report tracking, whatever you want it to be, when we go to run this test real quick, we're going to see a few things pop through in our data. What we want to make sure exactly matches is that the form ID, and we're going to see that populate through here in a minute when we run our test submission, is we're going to see the field form ID. And then we also want to make sure that the method is equal to form response.create. Okay, so that other filter, what that's going to do is make sure that the form that's submitted and the webhook data that it's catching is only that API endpoint that we set up inside of the connection, which is form response.create. So let's go through, submit a quick bug report to throw some test data into our automation to pull those fields into it. Go critical, send it. Oh, gotta drop an image. That. Send it. Okay, thanks for the report. So we've got some test data. Again, when you're using webhooks, there's some nuances to it, so please bear those in mind. It does take an actual minute or two, literally a minute or two, for the Plutio app and the Plutio server to pick up on the endpoint and to push that data to the webhook, and then for Zapier or Integromat or Integrately or whoever you're using to pick up on that webhook data. So it's not a literal snap of a finger. It's not actual instant. So it does take it a minute to pick up on all that. So when you're going through this and testing and you're like, why isn't it coming through? Why isn't it working? It takes a minute. So give it some time. give it a minute or two to actually pick up on that data. I guess I have to reset up my filters. That's fine. Let's retest it. Couldn't find anything. Again, that's what we're running into right now. Couldn't find anything. So there's nothing posted to it yet, or Zapier hasn't picked up on it in its webhook. Boom. Tested it again. We got a response. All right. So we'll go through, and what I'm talking about in my filter that I have to now reset up is some of this metadata here. It looks confusing and it looks like, garbage to some people or mumbo jumbo or whatever it is. But what we're looking for is the method and then this form ID right here. And I use this same method when I'm creating things in Zapier or Integromat. And I'll do the same thing in Integrately or Pavly or whatever I'm using. I'm using this same method. Okay, so we'll continue now that we have test data. We're going to set up a filter. Now we can actually choose our dynamic data from our actual test. So we'll go method in the search, grab the method, exactly matches. And then we want that form response dot create. And you can do these two in either order. It doesn't matter, honestly. You can do the method first and then the form ID second. It really doesn't matter. Form ID. And we want this form ID right here. You're going to see a lot of data in this insert data area because a lot of data pulls through from the form and in the actual webhook response. So just search for it right here, form ID, grab this, exactly matches. And then we want that form ID from the previous, from that form itself, which again, you can grab from the URL or you can grab from the embed. You can grab it from here or again, up here. It's right there in between the forms hyphen and the hyphen edit, or it's not hyphen, sorry, backspace edit. Okay, so we've got those two in our filter, and it's key that you do both of them in an and statement. Don't do an or, do an and. I'll show you why here in a second. Let's continue. All right, our Zap is able to continue because of the two criteria that it matches, and we'll show you here. The method is form response dot create, and the form ID is equal to this form. We need it to be the and because you want both of those things to match for this process to continue. So you're really scoping down this Zap to the one form. Again, this method will be able to pick up on all the forms, and you can do this the other way by using the form submission in Plutio app that's built into Zapier if you want to do it this way, or if you want to leave it open to any form and work with paths or any other method, you can do it this way as well. So again, two ways to do this. You can do it with a webhook here and use the filter to make sure you're picking up on the correct form, or with the pre-built Plutio form submission app inside of Zapier. So again, two methods, we're doing the same exact thing. So let's go through this method real quick. New form submission. Make sure I choose the right account and the right form. Test it. Since we just sent some data, this should pick up on it anyway. Okay, perfect. In this method, keep in mind, in this method, we don't need to worry about a filter. It doesn't really matter because we've already selected the form that this trigger and this Zap is picking up on. So it's already scoped anyway. So it really doesn't matter. Okay, so then what we're going to do is choose the account. I've already got my Excel account set up. Oh, geez, let me reconnect it. Sorry, guys. Got to reconnect my account. Okay, here we go. Where is it stored? You can do OneDrive or SharePoint. Typically, it's OneDrive. Is there a use case to use one method over the other? For me, if I'm building things within Integromat, I'll use the webhook method. Where it comes in handy, Jason, is some tools, they don't have an instant action. Like, for example, this app inside of Zapier, I believe, is an instant action. So the second somebody submits a form and that data is posted to your Plutio account, it's going to trigger this automation or this Zap. But in some other tools like Integromat, I'll show you this right here, there's not an instant action for a form submission. So here in Plutio, I don't have any instant actions. They're all ACID or just regular actions. The only instant action I have inside of Integromat to work instantly is the watch notifications, which is a very generic type of a module, but I'm picking up on that because of the webhook. So this webhook here, I've dropped into my Plutio connection inside of Plutio. And so again, this is the quote unquote webhook method, but I'm using this watch notifications method inside of, or module inside of Integromat. So this is the same thing in Zapier as the method I just went over of the catching the raw webhook or catching the webhook. It's the same thing, but this is a built module inside of Integromat. So again, it depends on the tool you're using for the use case. If I was building this in my account for for Integromat versus Zapier, I would actually probably use Integromat if I've got more than one form and I want the scenario or the automation to do more than one thing. Like if I wanted it to do something based on the forms that I'm using, I would use Integromat because Zapier is not meant for very complex automations. Because the only real way you can get to filtering or to moving from one path to another inside of Integromat is with, or Zapier is called paths. And that's a paid feature. And I believe you have to be on the professional plan or the professional tier of plans to get that. And it's pretty expensive. So I try to stick to Integromat when I'm using more than one form, or I need the scenario or the automation to go more than one way, depending on the form. Let me save this real quick so I can get back to it, but I'll show you real quick one use case for this that I built that I'm using actually internally. I haven't deployed it yet, but I'll be using it here pretty soon. I've got a pretty large scenario, and again, it's going to look big and it's going to look confusing, but this is a way that I can use multiple forms in my account, and I can use that same method to move the form in a workflow depending on what the form is. So if we look at this in a different way, if you turn this view 90 degrees to the right and just drop it from vertical, that's pretty much the workflow. But again, this is all predicated on the router right here, and it's going to take it different places depending on the form I submitted. I can't do this inside of Zapier. And if there is a way to do this, I have no idea, because I'm using like 4 or 5 different chains here, and it's also branching off over here depending on the form. So this is all accomplishable through Integromat, and I can't really do this easily inside of Zapier unless I have like 5 or 6 different zaps that did this same kind of action. But again, this is one scenario inside of Integromat, and I can have dozens of others. Recreating smart logic for your forms. It kind of does. Yeah, I mean, it is a bit of smart logic. But all it really depends on is, again, it starts here with that same filter, but all this is doing is picking up on that form ID and moving it to different places. So there is kind of logic, but it's just like an easy way to filter things. And so if it doesn't match the filter, it's going to go along or die if it's not the right form. So yeah, it's kind of logic, but it's mostly just multiple filters that push the form to its desired location depending on what form it is. Yep. So there's nothing really advanced or anything about it. It's just a pre-built tool inside of Integromat with filtering and setting up this kind of a scenario based on the form, not the input. Correct. Yep. I'm using this, and I can show you this real quick. A little outdated, and I've been doing a lot of work to get the forms different, so they may be a little outdated, but this is all dependent on the specific form that's being submitted. Let's see. So this one, so if it's equal to this or this, so it looks big and it looks kind of confusing, but these are all different current client forms that I have that I'm using for the forms for is for different client interaction, like I was getting to at the beginning of my session. So if they submit, or if a form is submitted that's this specific form, it's going to go down this path. And again, I've kind of gated those forms anyway, so only clients can get to them regardless. So it's not like anybody can just get to that form. And I also do some checks anyway to see if they're current regardless. But yeah, this is just some, tiered or just some, filtering that goes through and make sure if it's this form, then it goes here. If it's this one, it goes here. So yep, it's based on the form itself. Yeah, exactly. So again, this is accomplishable in Integromat. I don't know if you could do this in Zapier. If you can, you have some kind of probably super high paid plan or some other feature that I have no idea about. But okay, so again, getting back to this real quick build, new form submission in Plutio. We're going to be using add a row to a table. So it's OneDrive, it's the folder. Let's grab a specific folder. Where did I save this? It's in a different location. Let's go to development. Save. Okay, so now we've put it into a specific folder. Now in Zapier, just refresh it, grab new fields. So we'll go into business development. And again, this is all mapping inside of Zapier. The actual document should pull up here in a second. Automation test. Automation test, perfect. Now what it's also going to ask you for is where the actual table is inside which worksheet. So we'll reference sheet 1 because that's where my table, and again, not a worksheet, a table. So the table object is here inside of sheet 1, and we're looking at this right here. You can rename this if you'd like to. It's default to table 1 or the next in the series of tables. So let's go test table. Oh, geez, wrong syntax. No spaces. Test table inside of Zapier worksheet, sheet 1, and then I want to get to table 1. It's a little outdated, so you could just refresh to get that newly updated table name. Okay, that's fine. Table 1. Now, and here's where you will map your data to. So when I said mapping before, based in your worksheet, you've got your first, last, email, and all these other fields. You can then drop those dynamically into those fields. So let's go first name, value first. So it's going to look a little weird because it's got the data and then the actual field ID in the form. So if you just search for it, that's the first name. Search for it again, last name. Sorry. Email, and then the description is the long text. Make sure we're referencing the right. Please describe. So, got a question. Okay, now kind of ran into a bit of a tricky thing here. What you can do is search for, if you're trying to find the actual field like response of the form and you don't know what the, like I've got this name here, please describe your bug, and I've got the text field. But if you can't find that field, if you know that you sent through some test data up here and it's labeled as test, then you can go through and actually, I think it's going to do away with all my, nope, they've kept it. Okay. You can just put in that test data that you put in and get to your actual field here. So it's this label, this field label, and then the value of it. So you've got the question and the value, and again, they're both the same. So it's the same label and the same unique ID, question, and then the value. So that's your long text answer, your priority. So let's go back to the form. What is the priority of this bug? So we've got HRD4 question. All right, so this is another interesting thing about how the data is pushed through from the form response. So the same field, that one that ends in the HRD4 in my sample form, it's got the value name, the form type, the question itself, the value color, and the value. So what you want to do here is make sure you're using the value name, not the value or the color or the question or anything. You need to get to the actual text value of that, so critical. And then attachments, I'm not going to go into this. I think we've ran over our time a little bit on this session, but you would actually set up a looping app inside of Zapier to loop through. Right here, it's in beta, looping by Zapier. And I can cover this in a later session, or if someone wants to reach out, I can set up a video for it. But you would loop through and pull out all of the attachments and then set them up as either new rows or new field tables or table fields inside of your field here, so you can set up your multiple attachments and pull them all out. But to get to that, if there's just one, so I won't cover using attachments or like attached things here, because that can get a little complicated, and it's not an easy answer every single time. So right here, we'll continue just to show this all at the output. Yes, that. So then we'll test it. Make sure it's all good. A row was sent to Excel just now. And from here, you can turn it on and rename it whatever you'd like it to right here. So here's our test. So we just tested that Zap. We sent the data to Excel. And here is our output data. So we've got the first, last, the actual email, the test, and the critical. If you notice that the email is off, that's because I probably chose something different than what it should have been inside of the Zap. So all I have to do is, instead of the form type email, I can just go back and go find the field itself, grab the value, get rid of that value right there. And instead of the field named email, I just put in the actual email itself. I apologize, a little bit of an error on my part, but it shows you how to debug a little bit when you're testing these automations. Make sure you test. Always test your automations. Do it fairly heavily and make sure it's the correct output before you just set it up and turn it on. So we send another test to it. Let's make sure. Let's retest it. Resend another one. There we go. Okay. So now here is our test data. Perfect. So we've got the first, last, the actual email address, the test description, and then the actual priority. Now, to get it into a hyperlink URL, you would do this inside of Excel and format this column to be a URL value type. So that's something you can do inside of Zapier, but I would more than likely say to do this at the destination or in the source app of Excel. Okay, guys, that's pretty much it for that build. And that's our time for this session. I apologize for going over to not an exact hour, but I hope I've given some value to some folks or given some inspiration. From here, you would just turn this app on, rename it, and again, send through some live tests. So go into your form again, send some through, and then patiently wait at the output to see what the result is. But that's how I would build that Zap. But again, it's a little bit hard for me to say this is the one and only method, because again, there's two methods you can use to do this depending on the tool that you're using with Zapier or the method that you want to do for this workflow. But that's an easy way to do that. Okay, thanks guys. I'll stick around on this chat for a little while if anybody has any other questions or discussion, but that's how I would build that inside of Zapier. Jason, thanks for attending. I appreciate you jumping onto the session. If you want to jump on and discuss anything else, I'm pretty much done with the core content of the session. If not, feel free to hop off. I'm going to be sending out this recording to everybody as well that's signed up, and then posting it back here to the Plutio group as well. So if you want to rewatch it or pick up on a piece of content that we talked about, then you can by all means do that. I use all three in my services in my business. I actually specialize in four tools: Zapier, Integromat, Integrately, and Power Automate. Actually, I've used Pabbly a few times, but it's not a tool that I typically specialize in. I have done some work for it, but I just haven't really gotten into it too much. I know that some of my clients like it because of the AppSumo deal, or they can find cheap pricing for it, but I just haven't had a whole lot of need for it, so I haven't specialized in it. Use Integrately much? I do. I actually have been speaking a lot for about the past 6 months with Abhishek Agarwal, who owns and runs Integrately. I love Integrately. I think it's going to be once they up their app count or their different apps available, I think it's going to be a huge competitor for Zapier in the future. It's not as popular and they're still new, but some of the features are similar to Zapier, and they have really easy automation building. You can do like 1 or 2 clicks and map your fields and you're on the road. But I like Integrately because it caters to people who are not tech savvy or who don't like to do this stuff. So it's literally connect your apps, click the one-touch automation, and you're done. The one other benefit I really like about Integrately, I'm still sharing my screen, I hope you can see, but I like that it has the built-in logic of it. I think that's an awesome feature to give people to not have to pay for. And what I mean by that, I'll show you this here in a second, is logic inside of the workflow itself. Whereas in Zapier, you have to pay for it because of the paths feature. You can do some logic inside of Zapier, but you only have to rely on filtering or some other type of means. But in Integrately, let's go and modify it so I can switch to the builder. You can set up some if-then statements. You can really work with some easy logic inside of the builder, and I love that about this, because if I'm building an automation and I want to do different things inside of the automation, I need that capability of building in some logic or doing something without having to pay for paths, because that's very expensive. So this is a very, very awesome feature that when I found it, I really, really, really enjoyed it. So Integrately is way more. It is more affordable. I do caution people if they're asking me about Zapier versus Integrately. It is more affordable. There are some great features to it. I will say that they are new, so there are some bugs that they're still working out. There are some kinks to it, but if you work through those and work with their support team, who are very responsive, I mean, they are extremely responsive to support requests. So if you put something through the live chat and you have a question that they can easily answer, or if you need to get more help, they are very responsive to support requests. So that's one thing that I think will definitely set them apart to say Zapier, because Zapier, yeah, you can reach out and get support, but it either takes a little while or it's not as easy to describe your issue or get the true help that you need. So that's another huge feature. Is it as easy as Integromat or as robust? No, it's not as robust, and it's not as complicated. And that's why I compare it to Zapier, because it's a very I don't want to say more mainstream, but it's a tool that is catered to people who are not either data or true tech savvy, or that don't have the time to sit and mess with the module setups and mapping and getting all your flows right. Like if you just need 1, 2, 3 and you're done, then Zapier and Integrately are very very caterable to those types of builds. Whereas Integromat and even Power Automate's sort of similar. It's kind of a vertical down, or like a sequential kind of cascading build. Whereas Integromat's a true like white space, infinite space, do whatever I want for however I want type thing. So yeah, I don't think it's as robust, but that's by design. I think it's meant to be like that on purpose, because their tool, I think, is meant to easily onboard people into automations, get an automation built, be on the road, up and running really quick. So it's not really meant to be like that, if that makes sense. Hope I've answered your question. What would you say you specialize in when it comes to API webhook automation? Really anything, honestly. If it's a webhook, I can use it and work with it. Yeah, to me, it doesn't really matter what you're doing with the webhook or the data. Where you're placing it does matter, or where the source is coming from, whether it's Plutio or if it's an app or like an e-commerce store like Shopify or Woo or any of the other big ones. It really doesn't matter where it's placed or where it's coming from or how it's used. All it depends on is what the data coming out of it is. So if you're using it for e-commerce, yeah, it just depends on what you're trying to use it for, or what automations you're trying to use, or what workflows you want to build with it. Yep. So yeah, a little bit of everything to answer your question. Sure. Do you have any other questions for me real quick about the session itself or Plutio? Because I'm probably going to wrap up the recording and the live session itself. But if you want to, we can take it offline. Absolutely. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you watching the session or jumping in with me, Jason. I really appreciate it. Hope to get more interaction from folks, get some more, back and forth, some live discussion, and get some things built. Thanks again. Bye, everybody.